Hello everyone. This video is on the Knewton Alta assignment, section 2.6, part 1, called Solve Higher Order Equations with Factoring. So in this video, I'm going to be going over a preview of this particular Knewton Alta assignment. Now please understand that the questions I see in this video may or may not be the same questions that you see when you work on the assignment yourself. But the objectives are the same, right? So the types of questions should be similar. And I'm hoping that watching me go over some here helps you in some way when you're working on them on your own. Alright, so here's your assignment page. You got your typical, the title, the mastery bar. You can see your objectives. Looks like there are 2 objectives for this assignment. Then you have your current objective on here, and then a question below it, right, related to that objective. And at the bottom of every question, you should be seeing a feedback button for where you can send feedback to Knewton about a problem if you're seeing any issues with the question. You will not see the instructor cheat button. That's for instructors only. But you will have the More Instruction button, right? And you click on this if you're ever struggling with a topic, and it'll take you to a page with some reading or some videos, and you'll be given more questions on that page related to the instruction, and you can get through the assignment that way as well by keep on using this More Instruction. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so the first question is on the objective, solve equations by factoring out the greatest common factor. Alright, so if you remember how to solve quadratic equations by factoring, it's the same procedure. We're going to be solving these equations by factoring. And in order to do that, I'll just write it out here. So this first equation we're given is x to the 5th power equals 9 times x to the 3rd power, right? 9x cubed. And the steps for solving by factoring are the same as with quadratic equations. Now I'll refresh your memory here. I'll write the steps up on the side again. So first we're going to get, now these are going to be polynomial equations we're working with. Alright, so we're going to get everything to one side equals 0 on the other. Alright, get everything to one side, 0 on the other. So if I'm doing that here, I'd subtract 9x cubed, right? So we have x to the 5th minus 9x cubed equals 0, right? And it must be 0 on the other side. You'll see why in a minute. Right, then we factor the polynomial, or factor the expression on the one side completely. Now I'm not going to go over all the different methods of factoring again in here. Right? That was in section 1.5 of this text. I'm assuming you know how to factor. Right. So this, remember, the first step in factoring, right, is to factor out the greatest common factor, which for these two terms would be x to the 3rd power. So I pull that out. You have x to the 3rd times, and then you just, when you pull out the greatest common factor, it's just like reversing the distributive property. You just need to think of what would be left over if I were to redistribute the x cubed to give me x to the 5th minus 9x cubed. and that would be x to the second minus 9. Now this is not factored completely. X cubed is x cubed. I mean, you could write that as x times x times x if you wanted, but if it's just a single term, you can leave it. Anything with more than one term, you have to think, hey, can this be factored any further? X squared minus 9 is x squared minus 3 squared, right? This is a difference of squares. And once again, I'm saying I'm going to be assuming you know how to factor. Right? I'm not going to write out all those formulas again. X squared minus 9 would factor to x minus 3 times x plus 3. Okay, and don't forget the equals 0. Then we apply or use the zero product property, which once again I've brought this up in earlier videos. Right, zero product property, and again I'll abbreviate this ZPP. And then of course solve and check. But remember, the zero product property, I'm not going to write it, I'll just say it. If you have a product equal to 0, like I have here, then at least one of the factors has to be 0. So by the zero product property, either x cubed is 0, or the next factor, x minus 3, is 0, or the last factor, x plus 3, is 0. And then of course the last step is solve these equations. Right now that I've broken it up into 3 separate equations here, we solve and check. Right? And of course you always check back in the original equation, please. Right. Now x cubed equals 0. The only number you can raise to a power and still get 0 is 0. So this leads me to x must be 0 here. So I'll check that. X minus 3 is 0. You would add 3, get x equals 3. And then x plus 3 equals 0. You would subtract 3 from both sides, get x equals negative 3. And now we check these. Now 0 is good, right? If x were 0, you'd have 0 on the left equals 0 on the right. That's true. Right? So that's a solution. 3, you'd have 3 to the 5th on the left. 9 is 3 squared. 3 squared times 3 to the 3rd would be 3 to the 5th. You'd get 3 to the 5th on both sides. All right, 3 to the 5th on both sides. Should be 243, I think. 243 on both sides. So that works. And negative 3, you'd have negative 3 to the 5th, which would be negative 243. And then negative 27 times 9, negative 243 again. So this also works, right? And kind of like with the quadratic equations, if you go through and if you know for certain, 100% certain, that you didn't make any mistakes, the solutions you get at the end should work. Right? They should work out. But I still would say, when you're first trying this stuff out, when you're first learning, you should get in the habit of checking solutions. But yeah, so 0, 3, and negative 3 all work in this equation. So going back here, now see there, you saw this in an earlier earlier section. They're having you just enter the numbers, right? They have the x equals already. You don't have to type in x equals. You're just typing in the solutions. 0 is a solution, 3 is a solution, and negative 3 is a solution, right? All separated by commas. Get rid of that C there. 0, 3, negative 3, and then submit. Great. And then after every question, right, there's an answer explanation, whether you got it right or wrong. Please read through these just to make sure you understand why you got something right or wrong, right, so you can learn something for the future. All right, next question. Alright, so this time we're on the solve equations by factoring still. So it's the same procedure, right? You take everything to one side, 0 on the other, factor the expression on the one side completely, then use the zero product property to break it up and solve each of those separate equations and check your answers. Right? But this is with grouping. Now, again, factoring by grouping should be something familiar to you. Right? This was done in previous sections, previous videos. So I'm just going to write the equation out and do it. Right? You should know how to factor by now. Alright, so this equation, we have x cubed minus 6x squared minus 16x plus 96 equals 0. So this is already starting off the way I want it if I'm going to try solving by factoring. Right, I have 0 on one side and everything else on the other. And if you recall, right, polynomials with more than 3 terms, we can attempt this factoring by grouping. Now, when it had 4 terms like this, we tried this out, right? In one group, I put the first 2 terms, x cubed minus 6x squared. And then I personally like doing this, big plus sign, plus, and then in the second group, the next 2 terms, which is negative 16x plus 96. And then we still have the equals 0, and we're not done. We haven't factored anything yet. Alright, then I go into factor each group separately. Right, the first 2 terms have a common factor of x squared. That comes out. And what would be left over would be x minus 6 plus, then the second 2 terms have a common factor, a greatest common factor of 16. But if you recall from before, right, when the lead term of a group is negative, pull out the opposite of the greatest common factor. So I'm going to pull out negative 16. And then you'd have x minus 6 left over. All right, almost done factoring. Now that you've factored each group, right, you look at the thing as a whole. There are these 2 products here. They both have this factor of x minus 6. Right? So x minus 6 comes out. And if x minus 6 comes out, right, the remaining stuff would be x squared plus negative 16. So x squared minus 16. Right? Okay, so I have factored that polynomial, just not completely though, because once again, x minus 6 doesn't factor any further, but x squared minus 16 does, right? That's x squared minus 4 squared. So we have x minus 6 times x minus 4 times x plus 4. Alright, equals 0. Alright, so now that I have this factored polynomial equal to 0, right, I have a product equal to 0. So by that 0 product property, right, ZPP, one of these factors has to be 0. So either x minus 6 is 0, or x minus 4 is 0, or x plus 4 is 0. And then we solve each of these. And again, I know I did everything correctly, so these should work out, but you should still be checking them though. I'll leave that to you. So x equals positive 6 or positive 4 or negative 4, right? Solving each of these and then check them. All right, I'll do 4, all right, the small number. 4 cubed is 64. 16 times 4 is also 64. So 64 minus 64, those are gone. 4 squared is 16. 6 times 16 is 96. You have negative 96 plus 96. You get 0 plus 0, basically. You get 0 up there. And the same thing kind of would go for negative 4, right? All the signs would be opposites. And you can, now this is 6 cubed minus 6 cubed, that's nothing. And 16 times 6 is 96, negative 96 plus 96 is nothing. So I actually just did a mental check. All three of these work. But please, get in the habit of checking your solutions. Alright, so back here, again, they're not asking you to enter the x equals. Don't use any plus or minus signs, right? Don't use plus or minus signs, because I know positive 4 and negative 4 are solutions, right? So that means, you could enter, plus or minus 4. Alright, but, we're just entering them separately. So 6, comma, 4, comma, negative 4. Great. And again, please read through the answer explanations. Alright, next question. Same objective with the grouping. And once again, it starts off pretty nice with all the terms on one side, 0 on the other. So I'm just going to write this out and we'll do it. So we have x cubed minus 5x squared minus x plus 5 equals 0. Again, it's already set up the way I want to start when factoring by grouping. So again, I group the first two terms, x cubed minus 5x squared, plus I group the next two terms, which is negative x plus 5. The first group has, I guess equals 0, right? The first group has x squared in common times x minus 5 plus, now the second group, negative x and 5. The greatest common factor would be 1. But again, the lead is negative in here, so I'm going to pull out negative 1. And then you'd have x minus 5 left over. And now you look at the whole thing, both products here have a common factor of x minus 5. And so x minus 5 comes out. And if x minus 5 is removed, you're left with x squared plus negative 1, or x squared minus 1 as the other factor. And I'm not done factoring yet, right? X squared minus 1 is another difference of squares. So we have x minus 5, then x squared minus 1 factors to x plus 1 times x minus 1, or x minus 1 times x plus 1. Remember, the order that the factors come in isn't important, right? As long as you have the correct factors in the product. Alright, so now I have what I want, right? I have a product equal to 0. So then I'm going to apply that 0 product property. The only way a product is equal to 0 is if one of these factors is 0. So either x minus 5 equals 0, or x plus 1 equals 0, or x minus 1 equals 0. And solving these, we get x could be positive 5, or negative 1, or positive 1. And I'll tell you right now, I can see it, all three of them will work, but you should be checking these, right? Go ahead and check them back in the original equation. Okay, so back in the assignment, that's what I'll enter. 5 is a solution, comma, negative 1 is a solution, comma, and positive 1 is a solution, right? And it shouldn't matter what order they come in, as long as you have commas separating them and you have the correct solutions written. Great. Okay, moving on. Alright, so this is back to that greatest common factor deal. And it's pretty similar to the first equation I showed you in this video. Alright, so same thing, just going to write this out. Got x to the 4th equals 16x squared. So again, you get everything to one side. So that'd be x to the fourth minus 16x squared equals 0. Right, if I'm trying to solve by factoring. Then this x to the fourth minus 16x squared, they have a common factor of x squared. Pull that out. And what would be left would be x squared minus 16. Which, yes, it's factored, but it's not factored completely. Right, because x squared minus 16, that's another difference of squares. That factors to x minus 4 times x plus 4, right? Or x plus 4 times x minus 4, whichever order you want to put that in. Alright, so now I have it factored completely. And by the zero product property, either x squared equals 0 or x minus 4 equals 0 or x plus 4 equals 0. And then we solve each of these. Now again, the only number that you can raise to a power and still get 0 is 0. So this leads me to x equals 0 being a solution. Here we have x equals positive 4. Here we have x equals negative 4. And again, you can check them. They should all work. The 0 is the obvious one. 0 equals 0 if you plug in 0 for x. And these two should work as well. Alright, I'll leave it to you to check those. Alright, so back here, I'm going to punch in 0, comma, 4, comma, negative 4. Wonderful. Alright, moving on. Alright, still working in that greatest common factor area. Let's do that. Right. So I'll just write that equation out. We have 9x to the fifth equals 81x cubed. So I'm going to take everything to one side again, right? 9x to the fifth minus 81x cubed equals 0. Factor this side. Now they both have a common factor. The greatest common factor would be 9 times x cubed. And then if you pull that out, you'd have x squared minus 9 left over. But then this x squared minus 9 can factor. Right? That's another difference of squares. So we have 9x cubed times, and then this factors to x minus 3 times x plus 3. Alright, and then by the zero product property, now you could say 9 is a factor as well. You could say either 9 equals 0 or x cubed equals 0 or x minus 3 equals 0 or x plus 3 equals 0. Right, one of those factors equals 0. Now 9 equals 0 doesn't have any solutions, so you're not getting any information from that one. But it's the other three with the variables, right? The only ones that are going to be important are the variable factors. X cubed equals 0, the only solution to that would be 0. X minus 3 equals 0, solution is x equals 3. X plus 3 equals 0, x equals negative 3, right? And these should work. Right? These should work. And I leave it to you to check that 0, 3, and negative 3 work when you plug them in for x back in the original equation. Alright, so 0, comma, 3, comma, negative 3. Wonderful. Okay, now this one is just a select all that apply problem, right? So you don't have to enter the answers, you just have to select them. Now there's, again, it says select all, so probably more than one of these will be chosen. And this is very similar to the ones we've seen. Alright, just different powers. Right, so this equation, we have x to the 6th equals 9, x to the 4th. Take everything to one side. Factor this. The greatest common factor would be x to the 4th. You'd be left with x squared minus 9. And once more, we have a difference of squares, right? Now, this may not show up in every single problem. I mean, it has so far, but again, when you work on this, you might see some different questions with different things to factor. So we have x to the 4th times x minus 3 times x plus 3, and then I'll just jump right to the solutions right now. So, applying the zero product property, x to the 4th is 0 only when x equals 0. X minus 3 is 0 only when x equals 3. And x plus 3 is 0 only when x equals negative 3, right? And these should work. I leave it to you to check them. So back on the page, though, right, we have to toggle things, right? 0 is a solution, 3 is a solution, negative 3 is a solution, right? It says select all that apply, not just one of them. Great. Alright, so that objective's done with the greatest common factor stuff. So the last couple questions should be on that grouping objective, right? Factoring with grouping. Alright, so once again, I'll write this out. We'll take a look at it, we'll solve it. Alright, so it's already starting off the way I want, right? With everything on one side and 0 on the other. Okay, and so, I mean, if you were to group, the first two terms have x squared in common, right? So I'd have x squared times x plus 5. And then the second two terms, because the lead is negative, I'm going to pull out the opposite of the greatest common factor. The greatest common factor would be 4, but because the lead is negative for these second two terms, I'm going to pull out negative 4. Alright, and then, you can put the big plus sign in there if you want. Times x plus 5 again. Alright, so I'm just kind of skipping the grouping part just to save on some writing now. And then both these terms have x plus 5 in common. So I factor out x plus 5. And then I'm going to skip something. Do you see that x squared minus 4 would be left? But x squared minus 4 is another difference of squares. That would factor to x minus 2 times x plus 2. And then applying the zero product property, we get x equals negative 5, positive 2, negative 2. Those should be the valid solutions. Right? Those make each factor 0. So I skipped a little writing there, but again, that's because I've actually done a couple of these already for you. And with enough practice, you should be able to get pretty quick like this, maybe even faster. So yeah, so negative 5, comma, positive 2, comma, negative 2. Right, those are the three solutions of that equation. Wonderful. Alright, and I should have just one more of these. Alright. Okay, okay, do you see x squared comes out of the first half, negative 1 out of the second half? And you'd have x plus 7 left. So x plus 7 is a factor, meaning negative 7 would be a solution. And then you'd have, if you pull out x plus 7, you'd have x squared minus 1, which is x minus 1 times x plus 1. So 1 and negative 1 would also be solutions. Right? If you have a product equal to 0 and you know the factors, you can state the solutions. This one, I'm not going to even write this one out. Okay, I've done 3 of them now. I'm hoping you got the hang of it. With other practice you've done, you should know how to factor by grouping anyway. Alright, great. And again, if you didn't follow that, please just read through the answer explanations here, pause the video or whatever. Alright. And that should be it for the preview of this assignment. As I said at the top of the video, please understand that the questions I saw here may not be the same questions you see when you work on the assignment yourself, but the objectives are the same, right? So the types of questions should be similar, and the way you work on them would be similar. So I'm hoping that watching me do a few of these here helps you out in some way when you're working on the assignment yourself. And thank you very much for watching.